Our music is. Hey everybody, welcome back to the 76th episode of Taps and Patience. I am AJ with Audacity Micro here with Harrison from Precision Ingenuity. Hi Harrison.
How we
How
doing?
you doing?
Man,
I'm doing okay.
I feel like there's like a slight delay.
Yeah, our traditional talk over each other because of the bad internet connection thing.
Yeah. But it seems to be evening out. But no, I'm doing good. I'm exhausted, but doing good.
That's kind of where
So
I'm at. I'm coming off of like perpetually being behind for 2 weeks, and now I'm not behind for the first time, but I was not very productive today because I was so exhausted and so used to like running around from fire to fire that I kind of didn't know what to do with myself today.
Yeah.
Even though I really need to make parts.
Yep. Yeah, I've kind of had a whirlwind week, and I don't know if it's the new location or the fact that we have been in business a little bit longer. But here recently, I've been getting a lot of RFQs from new companies in the area.
Huh.
And I think this week alone, I've had 3 semi-major companies reach out to us, wanting us to quote some things. And so it's kind of exciting, but our main customer has also been sending us a whole lot of stuff. So like right now we're booked up for probably 3 weeks to a month worth of work. And we've got more that is of people trying to kind of fit in. So exciting, but also stressful.
Yes.
So
you're kind of at the point now where you need to grow to keep up with all of the work that you're seeing coming in. But it's also kind of like, I just did a big growth step, and like, is all of this work going to stick around forever? Like, is this just a temporary thing because of the new machine, or a permanent thing because of the new machine? Yeah.
Yeah. The 5-axis has definitely been a big selling point from talking to a lot of different people. Like just the bigger machine in general has opened up a lot of doors. Like I was running a part today. I couldn't have even run it on the Tormach. Like I could have, but not effectively. It's 19 and a half inches long.
Okay.
And it's just long and narrow. So it's like 19 and a half by 2 inches by 3/4 of an inch. So long and narrow. And I don't even want to think about how long it would have taken on the Tormach, but I basically ran 2 of the 4 ops just because it's got tapped holes on a bunch of different sides in like, I think it was like 7 or 8 minutes. And like, it just put a huge grin on my face just because I haven't really had it. It was an aluminum part as well. I haven't really had an opportunity to unleash the new machine on a large piece of aluminum yet. And so this is kind of the largest piece of aluminum I've put in there, and it just ate it, and it sounded great. It like filled up the chip tray, like at the bottom of the machine, like instantly. It was just put a smile on my face.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, just been doing that. What's been going on in your world?
So, like I said, I was kind of coming off of a busy week. Basically, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, I got behind because of that stupid Teflon part. And I've been playing catch up ever since. The last couple parts I've made were large for me, which was also kind of annoying and stuff I'm not really used to. The one I just shipped, it was 4 parts that were like 4 by 3 by 6 with probably 95% material removal on those. And they were really tall for the tools I had to run too. And they just took forever. It turned out Fusion said they had a 4 hour, 20-minute cycle time. And that's kind of what I was counting on. The first one, I didn't really get a good sense of time on because like I was making improvements to the program as I went along. There was a lot of operations in that program. That was like a 60 different toolpath program.
Oh my goodness.
And so there's like a lot of little tweaking as I went. And the first one probably took me like 8 hours to get it running. And then I ran the second one overnight and expecting to be able to come back the next day and run 2 of them that would take about 4 hours and ship them at the end of the day. But because the second one ran overnight, I didn't have a good idea of the time that took either. And so then I ran the first one the next day, and I didn't pay attention to when I started it. I didn't pay attention to when it ended. It was like, this feels a lot longer than it should have been. And like, it didn't really, like, I knew something was wrong, but it didn't really set into my brain. But then when I started the last one, the fourth one, it just kept going and going, and it wasn't stopping, and it just kept going, and it was taking longer, and I was getting closer to FedEx closing and closer to FedEx closing. And then it finally finished, but FedEx had already closed by me. So I got to do what is apparently my new favorite hobby of driving down to the airport an hour and 20 minutes away to drop off the package at the airport, because the airport FedEx closes like 2 hours later than 3 hours. It closes 3 hours later than the FedEx by me.
Oh man!
But then it's like an hour and a half or an hour 20 minutes down, hour and 20 back. I almost always end up buying dinner on my way too, because generally if I'm in such a rush that I'm having to drive to the airport, that means I haven't been paying attention to food. And so like it cost me like $25 in gas and like $10 in food and like 3 hours in time, basically every time I've had to do that. And I've had to do that 3 times in the last like week and a half.
Yep. So does your machine not track the amount of time it's been running?
No.
Or do you not look at that?
At least if it does, it's not on the screen that I look at. It might be like buried on a different screen.
You should look, because at least on the next gen controller, it has a timer of like the last program it ran, how long it took, and then it doesn't. The Tormach is nice in the sense that it'll keep track of which time the last program ran. The Haas will just assumes that whatever program you ran last, it's going to be the same program, so it just starts a countdown timer based off of your last run program. Which is kind of annoying. But it does tell you how much time has elapsed, at least on my machine, for a particular program. And so it's real easy to look at that time and compare it to Fusion for me.
It is possible that it does, and I just don't, I haven't gone looking for it, or I don't know where to look for it. That is completely possible. But on the screens that I use, I have never noticed it having the cycle time shown.
Interesting. Okay.
So remember, my controller is a little bit of a weird one, where it's like later than the old ones. It's like later than the classic Haas controls, but not quite a next gen control. So it's got some kind of weird features in between.
Yeah, I forget what that one was called. There's a name for it, and
I want to call it the Hellfire controller, but it's not. Coldfire.
Coldfire. Yeah. Yes,
I have like the Coldfire 2 or something.
Yeah, that one is close to the next gen controller in terms of looks, isn't it?
Yes.
And so I would think that one stuff. I would think that one would have the timer on it somewhere.
I could have just missed it. Like, having not gone looking for it, I could just have not seen it.
I would see if you can find it, because on at least the next gen controllers, and if you can find it and turn that on the next gen controllers, that little timer window, it tells you how many parts have run, or how many cycles have run on the machine, and you can reset that. But there's also a cool feature where you can add 2 macro variables to the timer window. And I learned a new trick watching one of the Haas tips of the days. If you have a Haas machine and you have a next gen controller, and I'm assuming this works for all of them, but I know it works for sure for the next gen controller, you can use one of those macro variables, and you can assign macro variable. It's either 118 or 188. I don't remember off the top of my head. I want to say it's 188 to that window. And if you have a wireless probe, it'll put the last probe value on the front, so you can see what you last probed. And it's super beneficial.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that like I really loved about the Tormach, was that like if I probed something in, I could see the value it probed it as, and it drove me nuts that I couldn't do that on the Haas. So until I figured it out, or saw a Haas tip of the day on it. anyways, I would definitely see if you can find a way to turn that on.
Yeah, I'll look into that again. Speaking of Tormachs, I think my old Tormach may be the most spoiled Tormach in history at this point with the new owner.
Oh, really? How so?
Yeah, so first of all, he replaced the spindle just kind of for fun.
Okay.
He also like did a lot of work on making it look really nice. Like he replaced all the stickers and he like did some painting, and I had some like Sikaflex that was kind of oozing out. He trimmed out all of that. But the other day, I talked to this guy pretty regularly still. Like basically on a daily basis, we chat. But he sent me a message like a week ago that was like, "Hey, have you ever heard of these RegoFix holders?"
Oh my god!
And I was like, "Yeah, those are good." I was like, "Those are pretty much top of the line." And he was like, "I found a deal on some." And then a couple days later, he sent me a picture, and he had like 25 Rego power grip holders that he is running on this Tormach. And apparently he doesn't have the tool changing system. He said, I should have asked for more details. He said he made a jig to set the tools and to call it back out. But that Tormach is running Rego power grip.
Oh my goodness.
It's awesome.
That's crazy.
So he's liking the machine apparently.
Yeah. That's funny. It's speaking of Tormach, kind of on a tangent to the Tormach. We finished our largest batch of parts that we've ever run. It was 5,000 piece order, and we ran them for a guy lives down in Texas, and he decided that he was going to drive up and pick them up instead of paying freight.
Okay.
So this will come back to Tormach. Okay, just follow my story a second. Okay. Well, long story short, when he shows up in a Cybertruck.
Ooh.
And what's funny about that is, one, it's the first Cybertruck I've ever seen in person.
Uh-huh.
But me, Weston, both our dads, our grandpa, and a handful of other people that happened to be in the shop at the same time, because he came in right around lunchtime. We were all standing in the front area of the shop at the windows, and we saw the Cybertruck pull up, and someone yelled out, "Hey, that's a Cybertruck!" And like all of our heads turned at the same time, and we're all staring out the window, and then we're like, "I think it's turning in here." And the guy turns in, and we're all just rubbernecking out the windows, and the guy like pulls up, and he's like looking sideways. He like comes in the door, he's like, "Is this precision ingenuity?" Or like, "You're in the right place." Anyways, that guy that we did the order for, he actually has Tormach 1100 MX, and we gave him kind of a tour of our shop and whatnot, and he was telling me that he's been running a lot of, I think it was aluminum parts on his machine, and he just said, he's like, "Man, I'm tired of running these parts," and so he might be shipping them up here at some point, potentially.
Nice.
I don't know. He's got to do some work on his end to see, because they're not. I don't think he's running the parts for himself. I think he's running them for someone else. But he doesn't do machining. He's more on the welding side of things, and so I think he's trying to get away from, because he's a solopreneur, kind of like we are, and he's kind of figuring out, kind of like we are, that you kind of have your core competencies, and you got to figure out what makes you the money and like get rid of the rest.
Yep.
Which is something we've talked about a lot on this podcast. And I'm finally to the point where I can start cutting things, because I know I'm starting to figure out what makes me the most money. Kind of circling back a little bit. And so like we just had this conversation today that there's a couple jobs and customers and things that we're thinking about clipping or limiting, or either raising our prices or telling them that the lead times are going to be greater, kind of trying to wean off that stuff and focus on the things that are actually important and making us money.
Yep.
So anyways, exciting stuff. So
yeah, after this these last batches of, or this last batch of jobs, I kind of had to sit down and look at my rules for like the jobs that I accept and the jobs that I don't accept, and refine those a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the reasons why I was running behind is I just took jobs that have too much material removal. And I love my little Haas office mill. That thing is fantastic. With some of these jobs, I got to really dial in some of my speeds and feeds, and I cut down a lot of cycle time in the course of just like because I had little wimpy speeds and feeds because I'm not used to removing material.
Mm-hmm.
But man, that thing just does not like long tools. It does not like large material removal. And so I sat down and kind of revised. My old rule was I wouldn't take parts bigger than 6x6x2. I have now made that 4x6 by 1.25. Basically, make it out of 1.5-inch thick stock is my limit. And I'm also putting limits on like I need to be able to finish the job at least 3 days early or not take it. That's the other place I got myself in trouble. I took too many jobs. They were all due at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if I stick to those, that'll help me a lot.
Yeah, we have a ton of inefficiencies in the new shop right now that we're trying to work through, and honestly, a large bulk of them, it's two things. One, the new machine is so much faster that I don't have as much time to program in between things. So that's one. And two, we don't have as many tool holders yet, and we have a lot more tools that we're using. So we've increased the amount of tooling that we're using, and we've decreased the amount of tool holders we have available. And so I spend a large portion of my time just tearing down and setting up tools and trying to figure out which tools I can take out of the machine without affecting or causing rework, where I have to reset them back up for the next part. And so I'm like trying to strategically plan and go, okay, I'm going to run this part, then this part, then this part, and I need this tool, and then this tool, and then this tool. And so even though it's got 30 tools in it and they're just about full, the problem is there's a lot of drills and taps that I'm cycling through. And when I'm setting up tools for the vise, or when I'm setting up them up for the 5-axis, excuse me, vise tools, I can usually do much larger diameters, and I can go much faster and higher with my feeds and speeds. But when I'm doing it in the 5-axis, I need to use a lot of smaller tooling because I have to baby it a little bit more.
Because of the work holding, or because of the loss of rigidity and just the stack up of components?
Right now, it's actually because of the vise.
Okay, so work holding on the
trunnion. The trunnion is fine, although I have it can get bumped if you're not careful. Like anytime you break a tool, pretty much break out the indicator and re-indicate everything.
That kind of sucks.
Yeah. So, but the main problem that I have is the vise. So I got the Haas 3-inch vise that they just rebranded from someone else, self-centering, and then the riser plate. And neither the riser plate nor the base have any sort of indexing to the platter other than the bolts.
So it's just friction.
So it's just friction. So if you come in with a large tool and start hogging out material, that vise is going to move. And that's the most recent problems I've been running into, is that because it's not pinned in any way, and that vise only has 2 bolts, and they're like 1.5 long, like M6 bolts going from the top down to the bottom, and they're not very rigid. They're just a friction fit down, and they're pretty sloppy. Like, you can rotate the vise. I was running one part, and the vise shifted 1.5 degrees. And when you get out to the very end of a part, that's
a lot.
16th of an inch or something.
Yeah.
And so I've been having to run smaller and smaller tooling. But my accuracy has been getting much, much better. So, like,
that's good.
As much of a pain as this has been, every time I find a problem on the 5-axis and I get better at it, the quality of my parts goes up. So I had a part that moved the vise, and I re-indicated it, and I got it down to about So I was about a thou and a half off on my furthest point, and I got it down to about 7/10. So I got about twice as good as I was before.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, I don't use the 5-axis as much as I thought I would, but that's just because I've been doing a lot of larger parts recently.
Mm-hmm.
But when I do get to use it, it's awesome.
You need to stick a Lang base plate on that thing and a Lang base plate on your table.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, money is going out much faster than it's coming in right now, and so
I understand that.
I'm having to very strategically choose what is the biggest annoyance in the shop, because one thing that's becoming the biggest annoyance right now is actually the bandsaw.
Understood. Yeah, I have the same problem. So yeah. What's going on with your bandsaw? Is it a like it not working issue, or a you are now over capacity for that saw issue?
So we're probably over capacity for this saw at this point for how much material we're cutting. Basically, a couple things are happening. One, the cylinder on the side of it that controls it is basically shot now. And it has a problem now where it'll come down part way and then it'll just stop because the cylinder like locks up. And then you have to raise it all the way up and then push it all the way back down and like get the fluid in it resituated, and then it'll start cutting. So like sometimes you'll walk away and you'll come back and like, that thing's been going for like 10 minutes. Why isn't it cutting? And it's because that cylinder's messed up. The other problem is we're creating so many chips now that I'm filling up the chip bin on the bottom of it like once or twice a month, when before it would last like 3 to 6 months before I'd have to clean it out. So it's just cutting so much more that it's just piling up. And then 2, because of how much we're cutting, it's splashing coolant all over the place. And with our new floors, it becomes really slippery and it's kind of a trip hazard.
Yeah.
And so you got to be careful. And it's burning through coolant because it's spilling everywhere. It's like the coolant system on it just goes on the blade, and then it's one of those Grainger bandsaws it seems like everyone has, and so it just spills coolant all over the place. So, which
that's like the same as the nicer Harbor Freight one, or the saw that the Tormach saw is based off of, right?
It's the Tormach saw without the automation. That's basically what it is.
Or like I think Grizzly has a version of it. Basically, all the companies that just import ones. Yeah.
Yeah, and ours is the Grizzly version. So, but anyways, that's becoming kind of a pain point. And we just replaced did I mention that we replaced the spindle in the Tormach?
I don't remember if that was on the podcast or not.
Okay, well, we burnt out the spindle on the Tormach and we've replaced it. We bought a new one and just swapped out cartridges. And whenever we sell the Tormach in the future, we're just going to bundle that old one with it. And then if someone wants to rebuild it, the new owners of the machine, if they want to try to rebuild it, because you will burn through another spindle, then they'll have that option. They can rebuild it and keep it on the shelf as a backup. But yeah, pain points of growing, they are real. we are blessed and drowning at the same time.
Yep. Speaking of growing, I'm going to take this opportunity to do a mid-roll plug for our Patreon. Ooh. We have a Patreon account. I'm doing great here at this plug. I wasn't ready for it. Patreon.com/tapsandpatience. That's what I was looking for. We have a couple different tiers. The top tiers nobody has backed. But we have a $10 a month tier where we will read out your name on the show. And we have a new member in that tier. So huge shout out to Chris. I'm going to butcher your last name. Sorry, dude. Chris Zajic, Zajic, from Zajic Precision. We've actually been friends on Instagram for a while. So thanks for supporting us, Chris. And then also in that tier, we have EJ at Nocturnal Welding, Simon, Chris at Thought Bomb Design, and also longtime supporter of Design the Everything, Jake Brownson. So thank you to all you guys. We also have some people in the Buck a Show tier. And we also, I guess I'll read your name too. We have a free tier which doesn't get any rewards, but thank you guys. And that is Dave. So Dave is new. Thank you, Dave, even at the free tier. A lot of people join the free tier to watch the Patreon and then decide if they want to pay. So thank you, Dave. All Patreon members get early access to all of our podcasts and then also the Audacity Micro YouTube videos, just because I don't have my own Patreon. So they get that as a little bonus thing. There's also a Patreon Discord that we do not have a critical mass right now for it to be good. But as we get more Patreons, we'll get more we'll get a conversation started in there at very least. So that does exist. And if you want to throw something in there, I'll see that like right away because it's the only thing happening in that Discord. So huge shout out to our patrons. We appreciate you. Right now, 100% of our Patreon money is going to our meetup at IMTS, which will be on Monday at the Pocket NC booth. They still haven't given us permission, but I think we're going to do it one way or another, assuming they have a booth.
Asking for forgiveness instead of permission at this point.
So Monday at IMTS.
What? Hey, AJ, just and to all of our Patreons that are listening, what do you guys think about doing kind of like questions from the Patreon page and doing them, kind of answering them on the stream? I kind of like what Dylan does.
I'm all for that.
But it won't be necessarily for guests. It'll just be kind of questions that people want to ask us that we can answer on our podcast.
I'm all for that because we definitely have some weeks where it's like, well, I ran the same part for a week and that was my week. So having some extra content would sometimes be good.
Well, that, and I would love to hear what kind of questions and struggles people have that we can kind of talk about on the podcast. Because I know we probably both have people that reach out to us. They're like, hey, I listened to the podcast. I'm dealing with this problem, yada, yada, yada. And I try my best to help out anyone who reaches out to me. But it'd be cool to bring those questions to the podcast. That way we can educate more people or kind of talk about what we would do in different situations.
Yep.
So anyways, there's a plug for that. And that'd be kind of cool. So what you got coming up?
So let's see. Coming up, I have backed down my job pace a little bit, which is good. On Monday, I have they're 5 titanium discs. There's some sort of microfluidics things. It's just it's basically a 2.5D part. It's a circle. It's got some grooves in the circle or some fluidics channels. My problem on those, I'm calling it now, my problem on those is going to be flatness. Because titanium, for whatever reason, when you cut it out of sheet, it loves to warp. So I'm still a little bit undecided on how I'm going to do those. I'm considering doing them as a 1-op part and lapping the backside flat. Alternatively, I might just face off the whole sheet and then flip it and then still basically do it as a 1-op part. But I'm thinking with a lapping, I might get better control over like where I remove material to just help with my flatness tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just tap it in for the first op and then cut it out later. So those shouldn't be that big of an issue. The smallest tool on them is a 1/16 inch, so nothing wild. Though they do have side holes on them. So I don't remember the exact thickness. It's like maybe 0.80 or something thick. Actually, it's probably 2 millimeters. But then they have holes drilled on the end of them going into the fluidics channels.
Oh, wow.
So those will be a little bit finicky to get lined up, but it's basically just going to be me spending a couple minutes with an indicator to, get them properly oriented with the Z-axis. So it's work, but this is a pretty high margin job. Actually, I haven't had to buy any tooling or materials, and it's an expensive job. So if it takes me 20 minutes each of fiddling, that's fine. I'm still probably making like $150 an hour on this. So
okay. Now, you still using the Flux work holding vise? Like, what's your work holding situation looking like these days?
So for this one, I'm probably going to use the just super glue work holding.
Oh, okay.
However, yes. So right now, a large portion of my work flows either from the Saunders machine work vise, the cheap Chinese self-centering vise, or a 4-jaw chuck. into the flux vise, and then it's done. So I have a couple methods of op1, and then generally the flux vise is the only thing I do for op2.
Still been enjoying that?
That's been working really well.
Yeah. Good. We had me and Weston had a conversation about vices this week, and we're ordering another vice for the Haas so we can get 2 vices that are the same size, so we can hold bigger parts across 2 vices.
You're not going to order a Lang thing?
At some point when I can afford it. So
how much is
$400 or $500?
Okay, that's fine.
And like, if I'm going to do anything Lang, I'm probably going to do it to the 5-axis. This is more for large parts on the table.
I mean, Lang makes those vices too.
But they're a lot more expensive.
Yeah, okay. They are.
So I've got them on my list, but they're up there with like RegoFix and a bunch of the other stuff that I want to get in the shop. But cash flow is king, and
yeah,
right.
I have a lot of stuff that I want to do right now. Where literally my only limitation is cash flow. I want to get I think I'm going to rebrand it. I was going to say I want to get the Cheeky Tools stuff launched more, but I think I'm going to call it Audacity Tools and Audacity Workholding. And like, it's just, what do I spend money on? And I spent my last big chunk of money that I had to spare on that Renishaw probe, and so now I need to save up another chunk. I have some parts I need to buy from you for the Chuck mounting plates, and what I think I'm going to do is I have 2 more designs for Audacity Workholding that I'm going to send to you. Mm-hmm. So the first one is that mounting plate for Chucks. And then the second one is a mounting plate for those Chinese vices. And then the third one is just going to be a blank pallet that's the same size.
Gotcha.
And I want to sell all of those under the Audacity Workholding name. And then I also need to get the tools formerly known as Cheeky Tools, now known as Audacity Tools, ordered.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. I've been using a lot of the Audacity tools over the last couple of days because I've needed some of the long reach and like the kind of extra rigidity they've provided. Mm-hmm. And I have a different generation of them that was made by a different tool grinder, and these ones were a lot better than the first generation.
Oh, that's good.
So I think I'm ready to move forwards with those. I do also want to make a probably a 3-flute and a 5-flute version of all of them for people, because originally they were designed for people with hobby machines, but now that I'm using them, I'm like, okay, there's actually a really good time and place for these on industrial machines.
Yeah.
And the single flute is just limiting when you have the power and rigidity to be able to handle more flutes.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to ask you, have you got your probe in yet?
The probe is here. The probe talks to the machine. Like, it is functional.
Mm-hmm.
My macros are not. And it comes back to this, like, my controller is weird. Mm-hmm. And actually, I should reach out to John of SL, whatever his YouTube channel is, because he has the same machine. Sorry, that was Vtour. But the old macros don't work on it. The new macros don't work on it. And I need, like, in-between macros. So
gotcha.
Someone sent me some that should work, and I haven't tried them yet. But basically, the probe works. It talks to the machine, but my probing macros don't work.
Yeah, I still have a random error that shows up, and it hasn't shown up for a while, but it showed up today, and I wanted to throw that probe off a cliff.
What does it give you?
So it has a random error that's showing up. I've recorded it. I've talked to Haas, and basically Haas has given me all the troubleshooting tips and things that I already know. And they said that basically they need to get a Renishaw expert in that can sit down with his reader and see what's going on with the machine. The problem is I can't get the problem to repeat. So it's like if he shows up,
hard to troubleshoot.
Like it's like, oh, it's working perfectly. And it's like, come back. Can you come back? In a day or 2 or whenever it decides to start wigging out again. But basically, what happens is I'll go to probe a part, and let's just say I'm running a batch of 20 parts. And on this particular day, I'm halfway through the batch of parts, and I have in process probing, and the probe fails for some reason. So I go over and I reset it, and it works. It's like, okay. And then 2 parts later, it fails again. Okay. I reset it, it fails in that probing. It just keeps failing and failing and failing and failing and failing, and I can't figure out what causes it. And sometimes it'll just start working again. Sometimes I have to do a tool change, and when it loads back in, it'll start working again. And today I had to power cycle the machine, and it still errored out a couple times, and then it started working again, and then it didn't have any issues. But basically, the error I'm getting, and it's a combination of 2 things. It could that I think it could be. It is either the Renishaw probe is set to the lowest power setting, and so it could be
that?
Yes. I'm just scared to mess with it.
It takes 30 seconds if you use their app.
How does
Renishaw has an app that will give you step-by-step instructions that are timed on how to set it. So like basically the way you program the Renishaw thing is you take out the batteries, and I think you hold the probe tip when you put the batteries back in, and then you start this like Morse code blinky, and it's, if you try to like look at a flow chart, it's like mind-numbingly confusing. But if you download their app, it'll be like you'll tell it the settings that you want it to set, and it'll be like, okay, hold the probe down for this long, and now stop. Now hold it down again, and now stop. Now press it 3 times quickly, and now stop. And it like actually, it's in real time. So if it tells you to hold it if you're supposed to wait for 5 seconds, it will on the screen tell you to hold it and then tell you when to let go in real time for those 5 seconds. So it goes from like being the super confusing thing to like, follow the blinky light pattern and you're good.
So when is Renishaw going to put Bluetooth in this $6,000 probe?
I think you have to buy the $20,000 Renishaw probe to get Bluetooth.
That way we don't have to use an app that is like giving us real-time inputs where it's like MapQuest.
It's very kludgy. Yeah. I mean, the old version was MapQuest, where you had to like print out the directions and follow them in your car, and if you missed them, you were in trouble. This is like upgrading to Google Maps, where it's giving you the turn-by-turn directions.
Yeah, and then you're like, and then you make a wrong turn. And it's like this one doesn't tell you to make a U-turn. Yeah. You just start inputting bad data.
Yeah, if you do that, it's super fast. It's super foolproof. It will like give you a blinky light pattern after you're done to confirm your settings, and the app will go through that with you and confirm your settings. So you'll know if you did something wrong. Like it's super, super easy.
Okay. I might have to do that. So anyways, that's theory number 1. Theory number 2 is that basically whenever I get a freshly machined part, it's the reflective surface on the part that's causing it to error out by bouncing light around inside the machine somehow. But I don't know if that's it or not.
And I think as long as you're out of direct sunlight, you're fine.
Yeah. So I'm not sure. I thought it was the light being too dim, but I don't know why power cycling the machine would fix it.
That is a good question. Unless it gets like halfway through a code and then loses signal or something.
Well, it does, but it loses it. Like, so say I'm probing a block. It might get through the first 3 touches, and then on the 4th touch, it fails. It might fail before it makes it to the first one. It might fail in the middle of the 3rd one. Like, it's so random where it fails at. It just starts failing constantly, and then it starts working like magic.
Which, that does kind of sound like a signal that's like almost strong enough, but like so close to being strong enough that it's within the like threshold. Noise could push it in either direction.
Yeah. So, anyways, I probably just need to bump that setting up and just bite the bullet and pray I don't screw up my probe.
Yeah, you won't. You can't do it with that.
So, but we'll see. I don't know why. I just have a reservation for messing with it. But
you've been listening to the Business of Machining, right? Did you hear? I think it was John Grimsmo's or maybe other Johns. Maybe it was Saunders. Anyway, the reverse rule of pi. This is the reverse rule of pi. You missed that? Oh, it's
well,
like some.
I've been so busy, I haven't listened to one in probably about a month.
Okay.
I got to catch
Well, the
up on a
rule
few.
of pi is things like tasks will take you 3.14 times longer than you expect. The inverse rule of pi is that there's some tasks that you have built up in your head and you think they're going to take you a really long time, and then you go do them and they're like nothing. This is an inverse rule of pi task. Like it seems like a big thing, but it'll actually take you 10 minutes.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, I'll just see if I can bite the bullet and get that done.
So, all right. Speaking of the rule of pi, I had the second most frustrating machining experience of my entire career in the end of this last week. So one of the parts I was making, it appears to be some sort of like extrusion die or some sort of punch die. There's like a female side and a male side. And the male side, it had a 4-inch disc base, and then it had a little like thingy coming off of it, a little nubbin that was kind of tall and skinny. It was about an inch tall off of the base, and it was maybe 3/16 by 1/8 inch or something in cross section, and it had a hole down the middle of it. And one, this is why I had to remove a ton of material, because I had to buy material that was big enough for that 4-inch circular base, but then also it had to be like an inch above the base. So, all of that material had to get removed around the little nubbin.
Mm-hmm.
So I had two parts that were in the same family, or two sets of these extrusion dies that had different designs on them. The first one went fine, no problem. That one had like a 1/16 or a 2 millimeter hole or something like that in the top of it. Went fine, no problem. The second one had a 50 thou hole. So the 50 thou hole is going about an 1.25 inches deep, because it goes kind of halfway through and there was a cross hole that met it. And so it spent, I don't know, like 2 hours or 3 hours on the machine. I think the first one was 2 hours. Spent 2 hours on the machine. And I was waiting for that drill to come in from McMaster. So I took the part off the machine. I did some other work. I put it back on the machine. I was like, all right, I just got to drill this hole and I can ship the part. And I go to drill the hole. It was, of course, covered in coolant, so I can't see anything. But, it's like 12 seconds to drill this hole. And the coolant turns off and there's no drill in the tool holder. I was like, oh, great. It turns out the drill was stuck at about a 45-degree angle out the sidewall of my part.
Ooh.
So it's like, oh gosh, I hadn't spot drilled. I just assumed that like the split point drill would be fine. I was like, oh, this is so annoying. So I was able to improve my speeds and feeds, and I think the next one took about an hour and a half. I loaded a new drill. I had plenty of drills. I set it up to spot drill, and this time I think I like went and got dinner or something while I was running. I came back and it was exactly the same. It finished with the drill bit sticking at about 45 degrees out the sidewall of my part. So what I ended up doing, I had to run it a third time, and this time the part was officially late. I was like, this part is not going to fail this time. I will not have this drill drift. So what I did is I took a 1/32 inch end mill and I bored down like 1 thou oversized of the 50 thou. The drill wasn't quite 50 thou. It was like 52 thou or something. So I drilled like 1 thou oversized, or I did a boring cycle with an end mill, 1 thou oversized down as deep as that end mill would go, which was like 1/8 of an inch, and then drilled. And that worked that time. But man, having such a long cycle time part just like fail after. Oh, the second op was like 2 hours. The first op was also like an hour or two. So it's like 4 hours every time it fails. And I got that down to like 3 later. But like it failing on the very last operation because some stupid drill wouldn't drill straight was so frustrating.
So what I typically do in situations where I feel like sketchy business is about to occur is I do two things depending on the situation. The first thing is I try to put those operations at the very beginning, if at all possible, to
I
try
should have.
to make sure that if I do have a problem, I can address it right there at the beginning. If I can't have it at the beginning, and if I'm going to be walking away from the machine because it's a long runtime, I will put a manual stop at the point right before sketchiness is about to occur. That way I can watch it and learn as much as I can during that moment to make sure that if I do have to remake it, I can see exactly what the machine did and how the part reacted. How did it sound? Was it a speeds and feeds issue? Was it a rigidity issue? And kind of solve it accordingly.
Yeah. My I was standing there watching it for the first time and I could not see it go wrong. And I could not, like, you can't hear a 50 thou drill run.
No, it's for you with such small parts. It probably isn't as good of advice. But
Yeah. I think what happened the second time is it didn't. Okay, I think what happened the first time, I'm pretty confident that the drill wandered. It tried to move off center line and then go in at an angle. I think that's what happened. And then as the drill got deeper and deeper, that angle became more and more of a bend on the drill.
mm-hmm.
So I think that's why the first one broke. Then I think the second one, I think my spot drill was either not deep enough or just didn't exist at all. Like the tool height was wrong on the tool or something. And the exact same thing happened again, which is why I think it worked on the third one.
See, that's where having a stop at least before to make
that's
sure
true.
that have it make sure that feature existed before you drill. That is an instance where you might not learn anything when it's running, but you would at least know before it ran if everything was that you had done to prevent it was in place and if that solved the issue or not.
That is very true. That is a good point.
And so I had the exact same problem with drills today, actually. I'm trying to switch to basically running only carbide drills. Mm-hmm. We've basically made it a shop rule that any new tools coming in are carbide. Any new drills coming in are carbide. But I had a part I had to run today, and I didn't have a carbide drill for it. And I had to run it was either a cobalt or high speed steel. I'm not sure which, but it was a really long, skinny tool. And I didn't pre-drill because I'm used to running carbide. And so I thought about it, but I was like, it should be fine. Was not. They went all over the place. And then, but what I did do is I put a stop before the tap came in because I only had one tap of this particular size. And so I put a stop feature in it to where it would drill, chamfer the holes, and then pause for me. And when I came back after it had done everything, I looked at the chamfers and all my chamfers were way off. Like the holes were like not lining up with the chamfers. And so I scrapped that part before I ran it. And then I pecked it with I put a different chamfer tool in there. I had a 4-flute chamfer tool and I changed it to a 2-flute. And then I spot drilled with that and counterboard at the same time, just all the way down to depth. And then I drilled it and I checked those and those came out perfect. And so that was actually an example where I had a similar thing where my drills were walking. I put in a manual stop when it got to that point on the part, and then I came and checked it, and it saved me from breaking the. I'm almost positive it saved me from breaking my only tap I had in that size.
Yep.
So, anyways, and the parts are due tomorrow, so like I couldn't have got those parts done if that tap broke, and so I was just like, I am doing everything I can to where if it breaks in while it's tapping, there's not much I can do about that because I got my speeds and feed styles. I know what should work. But if the holes don't line up because I'm not using a carbide drill, then it's going to break.
Yeah.
So, because I know those high-speed drills or cobalt drills, they can bend really far and not break. So, anyways, and then I had to do another sketchy thing today. I think we posted some of it on Instagram. Did you see that really long 1/8 inch tool that I stuck out?
Oh, you did send me a picture of something that I don't think I ever responded to. I haven't been on Instagram in like 3 weeks, at least for browsing.
Okay. Yeah, I think I did send you a photo of it too. I had a 1/8 inch long reach tool that I stuck out. It was a 3-inch long tool, and I stuck it out 2 3/4 of an inch.
Yeah, it's definitely long for an 1/8 inch.
And so I don't know how many times D that is. What is that? That's 8 plus another 8. So that's 16 plus another. What would that be? Like 20 times D almost, something like that.
Yeah.
Or more. And then the downside is I was only holding on to it by like 1/4 of an inch. And so I had ordered a drill on or a tool online that was 4 inches long, and so it would have had more in the collet. It was the same tool, but it was just a longer version of it. But it got delayed, and so I had to run with the ones that I had. So I was just barely hanging on to it, and the surface finish looked like crap, but the feature was in spec, and that's all I cared about. Because it was one of my local customers, and I what it was is they had 2 slots in a part and then a valley between them, and we were planning on just using a ball end mill and just slotting it, but then they had the far side slot had a flat bottom, and so I called my customer up and I was like, hey, can that be curved? And they're like, no, there's a shaft that butts up against that flat bottom, so it's like used for locating, so it needs to be there. And I'm like, okay. I'll make it happen. So anyways, I got it in there, but I had to slow it down to, like, I slowed it down to the minimum recommended because it was a helical tool. I slowed it down to the minimum based off their speeds and feeds. I like set all the sliders to the minimum.
Yeah.
And then while it was running, I adjusted my feed rate, and I think I ended up at around 10%. So from the minimum of what they said, and then 10% on the Haas controller, and it still sounded chattery, but it came out in spec. It just looked horrible. So it also took forever to run, but I was willing to make that trade-off to get the part done.
Yep. Have you used the geodesic toolpath in Fusion yet?
No, I've wanted to. I don't even really know what it does.
It's surfacing magic.
Okay.
I was playing with it the other day for the first time, and it seems to kind of combine like a couple surfacing strategies into one, and it works really well. It's something that I will use a lot more in the future.
I have not played around with it. I think I tried to add it on one part, and it like went off and did the complete opposite of what I was wanting it to do. And I was like, okay, I don't know enough about this toolpath, and I don't have time to learn, so I'll come back.
Yeah.
So I have been, when I first got the 5-axis, I tried to only put in parts that were dovetailed in it.
Okay.
But here recently, I've been just throwing parts in. I've been doing a lot of vice work and then throwing parts in and only doing a couple of features in the 5-axis, and it's been working really well for that. For like really large parts.
Yeah.
Like, parts that I like, for example, I had a part that was, think of like a big horseshoe looking part. And its fingers of the horseshoe taper down into like these really small tabs with holes drilled in them. And I didn't want to do it in the 5-axis because it was like 9 inches wide, or 9 inches long and 8 inches wide, something like that, and really thin features at the end. And so I did all of the work in the vise, and then I stuck it in the 5-axis to drill those 2 side holes and to eat out the material in the middle and just finish the inside portion of it. And that worked really well.
Nice.
And so I'm learning strategies to kind of mix and match 3-axis work with 5-axis work, do all 5-axis work, or the hybrids in between. And like another thing that I've really been loving about this is I have a lot of parts from customers that are long, skinny, and have holes tapped in the end. And I'd love just rotating that trunnion up on 90 and then sticking parts in it and then drilling and tapping them. Just because I can hold it so much higher up than I would normally. And that's really nice. So
we have a small business shout out for this podcast. It is ZP Machining, and I haven't confirmed, but I think. Well, no, that I'm trying to figure out if ZP Machining is Chris, our newest page. Oh, it is. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, Chris Zajic or whatever your name is. Sorry, Chris. Looks like he runs ZP Machining, and he asked for a shout out. So ZP Machining, they look like they make some firearms accessories, and then also offer some precision machining services. So it looks like he's doing some bushings on his website, which is zpmachining.com. In addition to some various firearms parts, it looks like they also have some like what's the term? Like extra knobs for bolt action rifles is what I assume these are, in various styles and threads. They have parts for some 1911s, it looks like. All kinds of things. So if you are interested in either high precision machining services or some firearm parts, check out ZP Machining. If I remember, I will put a link down in the description below. And if you would like your shout out on if you would like one of our very good at words hosts to shout you out on a podcast, send me a message and we will do our best to do good with words and give your business a shout out.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm deep looking at ZP Machining stuff.
I'm just so good at sales pitches here. We're recording this later than normal, and I've used all my words for the day, so there's no more words left.
It's just been a long week for me too, because I've had a lot of orders last week and a lot of orders this week, and honestly, it doesn't feel like a lot of orders. And it shouldn't be a lot of orders. Like we should have gotten all these parts done significantly faster. But due to all of the foreseen problems discussed earlier of shop inefficiencies, it's taking much longer. Like, for example, I had a block with holes part this morning, and the part had been programmed yesterday, and I didn't finish it up until 10:30 this morning. And it shouldn't have taken that long. By a long stretch.
Yeah.
But I had like in the problem with it was just inefficiencies of well, it was a lot of different things, but it was very frustrating. And then after that, like it took like 4 hours to get that stupid part done. I got like 4 parts done in like 2 hours. Because everything just like flowed for a short burst. And so like it's getting to that flow state where I stop running into these small hiccups that are actually large and really slow everything down. Because if you can kind of, and Weston was lamenting today, he's like we are such not a lean shop right now. And I was like, yes, you were correct. And but that's kind of the joys of new machines and new processes that you're trying, and like you're gonna be inefficient before you're efficient, and you just got to learn how to get efficient as efficiently as possible, for lack of a better way to say it. And so, anyways, that's what we're fighting. And it's just annoying.
I have just one last fun fact to share before we wrap up here. I have found another way to integrate AI into our podcast. So right now, we are AI edited. We use AI captions. At one point, we used an AI generated song as our intro song. That was kind of cool. We now have AI generated YouTube shorts.
Oh, cool.
So there's a service that looks at our episodes and it'll like figure out a whole bunch of shorts, and it does a shockingly good job at editing them. It like puts our faces like side by side, even with the Zencastr automatic editing, where like one of us is down in the corner, it still like crops in on our faces and chooses spots of the podcast that it thinks are interesting. So YouTube Shorts are now coming out. I have like at least one scheduled for the next 2 weeks. So I don't know. I just thought that was kind of cool that exists.
Seems how you brought up AI and how much we're using it. I will mention one thing that kind of scared me today about AI.
Ooh.
So, well, I don't know if it's AI or just tinfoil hat stuff, but I was talking to Weston about going and dropping off packages at a customer, and it was around lunchtime, and we hadn't really talked about it much. And I was just like, hey, I think I'm going to run to this place and drop these parts off and pick us up lunch and bring them back. And he's like, okay, sounds good. And that was basically the extent of our conversation. And I go and I get in my car and I turn it on and my iPhone dings and goes, hey, it's going to take you such and such time to get to this business. And I was just like, this was a spur of the moment thing. I just said it verbally to Weston. And I go and I get in my car and my phone goes, oh, hey, are you trying to go to this location? It's like, I haven't gone there. Like, it is not my normal route. Like, anytime I get in my thing, it tries to say, oh, you're going to go here, you're going to go there, whatever. This is not a place that I go to on a regular basis. This is, and in fact, I think I've only gone to that place a handful of times since I've been at the new shop. But the fact that it knew instantly, hey, you're trying to go to this business.
Yeah.
It's like, you shouldn't know that unless you're paying really close attention, and I don't want you to be. So anyways, thought I'd mention that.
I, for one, welcome our robotic overlords.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everyone kind of knows, like, there's been that whole trend online that has happened where, you know, someone will pick up their spouse's phone and say all the things that they want. That way that person gets those ads. So, I mean, like, your phones are already listening, but it's just, when it's so blatant and in your face like that, like, sometimes it'll throw you back on your heels. Like, okay, that's bad.
There we go. This music feels appropriate.
Yeah. It's kind of that, I don't know, like Matrix-y music almost.
Yeah, or like conspiracy theory. Aliens are everywhere.
Yeah, aliens. Yeah, that's more like it. Well, guys, me and AJ are both running on fumes this evening, so hopefully you enjoy our podcast of craziness and tinfoil hats. But for those of you that have held on to the end, we appreciate you guys hanging out with us, and we ask that you please like and subscribe and share with everyone what you've hopefully learned here. So, anyways, this is Harrison with Precision Ingenuity signing out with AJ of Audacity Micro.
Not gonna think of anything funny. I tried.